Picture this. You're 75 years old, sitting in your living room, and you suddenly realize you've been carrying the same emotional baggage for 30 years. That heavy feeling in your chest when your daughter doesn't call as often as you'd like. The anger that still bubbles up when you think about that co-worker who got the promotion you deserved back in 1987. The constant worry about what the neighbors think of your overgrown lawn. Here's the shocking truth that most people never realize. 73% of people over 60 carry emotional baggage that weighs more than any physical limitation they'll ever face. I've spent decades studying human behavior, and I can tell you this without hesitation. The biggest obstacle to aging well isn't your creaky knees, your failing eyesight, or even your shrinking bank account. It's the emotional habits you refuse to let go of. These invisible chains keep you trapped in patterns that steal your peace, your joy, and your ability to truly live your remaining years with dignity and freedom. Most folks think aging gracefully is about hitting the gym 3 times a week or having a fat retirement account. Sure, those things help, but they're not the real game changers. The real transformation happens when you finally release the emotional patterns that have been quietly sabotaging your happiness for years, maybe even decades. Let me share with you 10 emotional habits that you absolutely must eliminate if you want to experience genuine freedom in your later years. These aren't just feel-good suggestions or nice ideas to consider when you get around to it. These are the specific behaviors and mindsets that separate people who age with grace and contentment from those who become bitter, isolated, and filled with regret. First up, you've got to stop seeking approval from others. Think about it. At 60, 70, or 80 years old, you're still trying to please people who probably aren't even thinking about you. Just last week, I talked to Martha, a 72-year-old woman who admitted she still changes her outfit 3 times before going to the grocery store because she's worried about running into her former boss. She's been retired for 7 years. You're editing your words at family dinners, changing your clothes to fit some imaginary dress code, modifying your opinions to avoid ruffling feathers, all to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. This is emotional slavery, plain and simple, and it's time to break free. I've watched people in their 70s still dressing to impress neighbors they genuinely don't even like. Picture this. Harold, a 78-year-old retired teacher, spends every Saturday morning meticulously trimming his hedges with nail scissors because he's convinced the Homeowners Association president is judging his yard work. The guy hasn't spoken to his neighbor in 5 years, but he's still performing for an audience that isn't watching, still biting their tongues in family gatherings because they're afraid of causing conflict, still saying yes to church committees and social obligations that drain their energy because they can't bear the thought of disappointing someone they barely know. Here's the reality check you need. Most people are far too busy managing their own lives and insecurities to spend much time judging yours. That critical voice you think you hear from others is often just your own inner critic projected outward. When you stop performing for an audience that isn't really watching, you discover something beautiful. Authenticity feels like coming home to yourself after decades of living in someone else's house. The second toxic habit that's poisoning your golden years is holding on to old resentments like they're precious family heirlooms. Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You're carrying around anger from decades ago, nursing wounds that happened when you were a completely different person, in a completely different world. That co-worker who undermined you in 1985 when you were both competing for the same promotion. That friend who betrayed your trust 20 years ago by sharing your personal business at the neighborhood barbecue. That family member who said something cruel at your 50th birthday party that still makes your blood boil every time you think about it. Take Eleanor, for example. She's 81 now, and she still refuses to speak to her sister because of an argument they had over their mother's funeral arrangements 15 years ago. 15 years. She's missed birthdays, holidays, and the chance to watch her nieces and nephews grow up, all because she's holding on to anger about flower arrangements and casket choices that literally don't matter to anyone anymore, including her deceased mother. These grudges aren't protecting you from future hurt. They're not keeping you safe or proving your point to anyone who matters. They're slowly corroding your ability to experience joy in the present moment. Every time you replay those old hurts in your mind like a broken record, you're choosing to live in the past instead of embracing the life you have right now. Forgiveness isn't about pretending the hurt never happened or rolling out the red carpet for toxic people to waltz back into your life. It's about releasing the grip that past pain has on your present peace. It's about refusing to let someone who wronged you years ago continue to control your emotional state today. The third habit that's stealing your happiness is constantly comparing yourself to others. And social media has made this worse than ever. You scroll through Facebook and see your neighbor's perfect garden photos while looking at your own small balcony with its struggling tomato plants, and suddenly you feel like a failure. You see your friends' posts about their grandchildren's achievements. Little Timmy got into Harvard. Sweet Sarah is starring in the school play, and you feel somehow diminished by your own family's ordinary moments. Your grandson works at the local hardware store, and your granddaughter is taking a gap year to figure things out, and suddenly that feels like not enough. I know a woman named Betty who stopped going to her weekly coffee group because she couldn't stand hearing about everyone else's cruise vacations when she's living on a tight fixed income. Instead of enjoying the friendship and conversation she used to love, she's sitting home alone, measuring her retirement against everyone else's highlight reel and finding herself lacking every single time. This comparison trap is particularly vicious in later years because you're comparing your behind-the-scenes reality with everyone else's carefully curated social media posts. You see their vacation photos, but not their health struggles or the credit card debt they racked up paying for that trip. You hear about their financial security, but not their family conflicts or the loneliness they feel in their big, empty house. You notice their active social life, but not their private struggles with depression or chronic pain. Your journey is unique to you. Your challenges are specific to your circumstances. Your victories, no matter how small they might seem to others, are yours to celebrate without apology. When you stop measuring your life against other people's stories, you start appreciating the richness of your own experience. The fourth habit you must eliminate is accumulating material possessions without purpose. I'm talking about holding on to things that no longer serve you simply because you've always had them, or because you feel guilty about getting rid of them. Walk through your house right now, and I guarantee you'll find closets full of clothes you haven't worn in 5 years, rooms packed with furniture that makes it hard to move around, drawers stuffed with papers and mementos that bring you stress instead of joy. This isn't about becoming a minimalist or throwing away everything you own in some dramatic purge. It's about recognizing that physical clutter often reflects emotional clutter. When you hold on to objects out of guilt, fear, or habit, rather than love or utility, you're weighing yourself down unnecessarily. Every item in your space should either serve a practical purpose or bring you genuine happiness. That expensive china set gathering dust in your dining room cabinet because it's too good for everyday use. Either start using it for your Tuesday night dinner or let it go to someone who will actually enjoy it. Those books you'll never read again, taking up 3 bookshelves. Pass them on to someone who might discover them for the first time. That furniture that makes your living room feel cramped and overwhelming. Create some room to breathe and move around comfortably. The fifth toxic habit is adopting a victim mentality about your circumstances and wearing it like a badge of honor. Life has dealt you some genuinely difficult cards over the years. You faced losses that broke your heart, disappointments that crushed your dreams, health challenges that changed everything, financial setbacks that forced you to completely reimagine your retirement. These experiences are real, and your pain is completely valid. But there's a crucial difference between acknowledging your struggles and building your entire identity around them. I've met people who introduce themselves by their problems. "Hi, I'm Janet. I have arthritis and my husband died 3 years ago." When you constantly tell the story of how life has wronged you, you reinforce your own powerlessness. You become the star of a tragedy instead of the author of your ongoing story. Yes, unfair and painful things have happened to you that were completely beyond your control, but you still have choices about how you respond, how you frame your experience, and what you focus on moving forward. This doesn't mean slapping on a fake smile and pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means recognizing that even in difficult circumstances, you retain agency over your attitude, your actions, and where you direct your attention. You can acknowledge your pain without letting it define your entire existence or dominate every conversation you have. The sixth habit that's sabotaging your peace is holding unrealistic expectations about your family relationships and then feeling constantly disappointed when reality doesn't match your fantasies. You expected your children to call more often, visit more frequently, and include you more deeply in their daily lives. You imagined your grandchildren would be more interested in your stories about the good old days and would seek out your wisdom about life. You thought your spouse would age exactly the way you did, with the same interests, energy levels, and priorities. These expectations aren't necessarily wrong or unreasonable, but they become toxic when you use them as the sole measure of your worth and happiness. Your adult children have their own lives, careers, relationships, and challenges that consume most of their time and energy. They love you, but they can't be responsible for filling every emotional need you have or providing all your social interaction. Your grandchildren are growing up in a completely different world, with different pressures, interests, and ways of connecting that might not include long phone conversations with grandparents. When you release these rigid expectations, you create space for authentic connection based on what's actually possible, rather than what you think should happen. Instead of feeling constantly disappointed by what your family isn't giving you, you start noticing and appreciating what they are offering. That brief phone call becomes a gift instead of evidence of neglect. A simple text message with a photo becomes a moment of genuine connection instead of proof that they don't care enough to have a real conversation. The seventh habit, and perhaps the most challenging one to release, is clinging to your past identity like a life preserver. You spent decades defining yourself by your job title, your role as the family problem solver, your physical capabilities, your social status in the community. Now many of those defining characteristics have changed or disappeared entirely. You're no longer the department manager everyone came to for decisions, the team captain who organized everything, the one everyone relied on for advice and solutions. This identity crisis is one of the most profound challenges of aging, and many people never successfully navigate it. They spend their remaining years trying to recapture who they used to be instead of discovering who they are now. They talk endlessly about their past accomplishments while feeling empty and purposeless about their present reality. I know a retired executive who still carries business cards from his old job and hands them out at social gatherings, even though he's been retired for 8 years. But here's what I've learned from working with thousands of people navigating this transition. Beneath all those roles and titles and achievements, there's an essential you that has nothing to do with external circumstances. This is the part of you that experiences wonder at a beautiful sunset, that feels moved by a piece of music, that connects with another person's story of struggle or triumph. This essence doesn't diminish with age. In many ways, it becomes more accessible when you're no longer distracted by the demands of maintaining your external identity. Your worth was never actually dependent on your job performance, your parenting success, or your physical strength. Those were just the costumes you wore while living your life. Now you have the opportunity to discover who you are without the costume, and that can be incredibly liberating if you let it. The eighth habit you must eliminate is allowing fear to paralyze your choices and make your world smaller every year. Fear of falling keeps you from taking walks that would improve your health and mood. Fear of technology keeps you from video chatting with distant family members or learning new skills online. Fear of looking foolish keeps you from trying new activities, taking classes, or learning something you've always been curious about. Fear of being a burden keeps you from asking for help when you genuinely need it, which often makes situations worse and more dangerous. Some caution is absolutely wise and appropriate as you age. You shouldn't take unnecessary physical risks or ignore legitimate safety concerns. But many of the fears that limit older adults are vastly disproportionate to the actual risks involved. You avoid experiences that could enrich your life because of worst-case scenarios that are unlikely to occur. Every time you choose comfort over growth, safety over experience, you make your world a little smaller. The goal isn't to be reckless or ignore real limitations. It's to distinguish between reasonable precautions and fear-based limitations that rob you of opportunities for joy, connection, and personal growth. The ninth toxic habit is cultivating bitterness and cynicism about the world around you, like it's some kind of protective armor. You've lived long enough to see plenty of disappointment, corruption, and cruelty to justify a pessimistic worldview. People have let you down. Institutions have failed you. Politicians have lied. The world seems to be getting worse instead of better, and young people today don't have the same values you were raised with. This cynical perspective feels protective, like you're being smart and realistic about human nature, but it's actually isolating you from the very connections and experiences that could bring meaning to your remaining years. When you approach every situation expecting the worst, you miss opportunities for connection, joy, and wonder. When you assume people have selfish motives, you prevent yourself from experiencing their genuine kindness. When you focus exclusively on what's wrong with the world, you become blind to what's still beautiful and good. Cynicism masquerades as wisdom, but it's often just disappointment wearing a disguise. You can acknowledge the very real problems in the world without losing your capacity for hope, gratitude, and wonder. You can be realistic about human nature without assuming the worst about every person you meet. The 10th and final habit you must eliminate is refusing to ask for or accept help when you need it, as if independence is more important than safety, connection, or quality of life. Independence has been a source of pride throughout your life, and the thought of depending on others feels like failure or weakness. You struggle with tasks that have become genuinely difficult instead of asking for assistance. You decline offers of help even when accepting them would improve your daily experience and reduce stress. This stubborn self-reliance isn't protecting your dignity or proving your strength. It's often putting you at unnecessary risk and preventing you from maintaining the very independence you're trying to preserve. When you refuse help with grocery shopping because you don't want to be a bother, you might end up eating poorly or going without things you need. When you won't accept assistance with home maintenance tasks that have become physically challenging, you might create safety hazards or let your living situation deteriorate. Accepting help gracefully is actually a skill that enhances your relationships and can extend your independence in the long run. When you allow others to assist you, you give them the gift of feeling useful and needed. You create opportunities for connection and reciprocity. You acknowledge the reality that humans are interdependent beings who thrive through mutual support, not isolated self-sufficiency. Throughout my years of working with people in their final decades, I've never heard anyone express regret about letting go of these toxic habits. I've never had someone tell me they wished they'd held on to their resentments longer, maintained their need for approval deeper into their 80s, or clung more tightly to their past identity. But I have heard countless expressions of regret about not making these changes sooner. People wish they'd forgiven earlier, loved more freely, worried less about others' opinions, and embraced their authentic selves while they still had the energy to fully enjoy the freedom. The beautiful truth is that it's never too late to start releasing these emotional burdens. You don't have to wait for a health crisis or a major life change to begin this work. You can start today, right now, by choosing one of these habits and taking a small step toward letting it go. Maybe you write a letter you'll never send, just to release some old anger. Maybe you wear that nice outfit you've been saving for a special occasion. Maybe you ask your neighbor for help with something you've been struggling to do alone. Your later years can be a time of unprecedented freedom, authenticity, and peace, but only if you're willing to release the emotional baggage that's been weighing you down. The question isn't whether you're too old to change. The question is whether you're finally ready to be free.